This is Beach Talk Radio.
Good morning, Mr. and Mrs. America, and all ships at sea. This is your captain speaking, Dean Jean. Dean Jean. The following will be a test of the ship's whistle, the sonar alarm, the cable alarm, and the atomic attack alarm.
Hello, America, and welcome to the #1 radio station in all of Fort Myers Beach. Beach Talk Radio. Here are your hosts, Kim and Ed Ryan.
And a good evening, everybody, and welcome to episode number 35 of Mondays with the Mayor. Today happens to be Tuesday because it's my radio voice. I want to make sure everybody's awake out there in Radio Land. My trusty sidekick is with us tonight because she's off of school. No school for you today and no school for you tomorrow. Because there's a big giant hurricane out there making its way up the Gulf toward the Big Bend area of Florida. And we've been getting some great pictures from folks who are on Fort Myers Beach or were on Fort Myers Beach. And keep the pictures coming. Everybody wants your pictures. Gage from NBC keeps stealing them, or not stealing them. He gives us more credit than anybody. I saw they were on Fox 4, and then a wink. Matt, the weather guy, gave us credit there, and a couple other places. So keep the pictures coming. We make sure. We make sure that they always get credit if they want it. There are a few people out there that said they didn't want credit for it for whatever reason. So we'll take full credit for it if you don't want it. So right now joining us with half the photo, he's in half the picture right there, is Mayor Dan Allers.
Sorry.
There we go. Now you look.
That better?
Oh, yeah. Perfect. So before we get right to the questions, Dan, I did want to say hats off to you. Kudos to you and to Andy and to the full town council and Jenny Dexter and the town staff. The way that you guys got out in front of the board yesterday, it kind of started, which is an amazing thing to see how these storms just all of a sudden, you're not really paying attention, and then you really are paying attention. Like it really started to ramp up on Sunday, and you could tell you were all getting ready to have a press conference on Monday, and it went off perfectly. You had everything organized, and you had the full council and the staff behind you, and the communication was great. The idea about Walmart off the island as a place for people to go was perfect. And then the hurricane passes, making sure people had those and explaining to them how to get them, whether they were picking them up or getting them in the mail. And then, having a backup if somebody wasn't able to get it. Like Andy was like, we're going to take care of you if you don't have it in time. And the whole thing just seemed to, even though this one might seem like a dud for us, unfortunately, it's not going to be a dud for some other people, but it was a great dry run, if nothing else.
Trial run. Yeah, well, it's not dry. It's going to be wet. Right. It's definitely wet down there, but trial run.
So congratulations. Great job.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I mean, even up until about 2 o'clock this afternoon, people were still coming in to get the pass. All the staff were gone. They were able to get out just before that first big wave came in, where you started seeing the pictures of the flooding down on 1st and 2nd, 3rd Street. Or 2nd and 3rd Street and Crescent. And then we're coming in at the last minute trying to get their hurricane passes and their sandbags. So Andy and I and Frankie were sitting in there filling out the forms. So I'm sure come tomorrow, we're probably going to be chastised for not doing the proper procedures, but we did the best that we could. We verified who they were and did those things, but we maybe got the numbering wrong a little bit, but.
Now, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, how is it? It looks like you're down there. So how is it down there?
Yeah, I actually just got back to the house. Frankie and I and Andy have been running around all day, and there's quite a few Lee County Sheriff's officers out there. We see the fire department going around with their lights on, checking the streets. For the most part, I think people listened to the warnings that were in campers. We saw several campers kind of going off. The rush got really busy there about 11:30, between 11:30 and 12:30. I think it came on quicker than people expected. So we were still seeing people hook up to their campers and pulling them off, but it's pretty quiet on the island. So it looks like most people got off the island, which is good.
And then one of the first things you said at the press conference yesterday, it was about the importance of communication, and we could see it right away. I mean, there's 800, 700 people watching the press conference just on our page. I'm sure there was many watching it on the YouTube channel, and then you had all the TV stations there. They were there, and then even today's, we knew it was going to be a short meeting because you're only really there for one item, but there was a ton of people watching. The interest about the beach is still strong.
Yeah, unfortunately, Ian is still fresh in everybody's memory, and that storm, it looks like now that we're probably going to be pretty safe. It's just south of us still a little bit, but I think we're pretty good with it making that hard turn towards us like we were all worried about. Unfortunately, it's gonna make its way up. It looks like towards Cedar Key, and they're going to be on the dirty side of the storm. It's looking like. So that little town is probably in for a wallop like we had to deal with. But so we're keeping an eye on that. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of information and it changes minute by minute, hour by hour. So we try to get it out as fast as we can. We were taking a look at some of the streets that were flooding. I thought it was important for Andy and Frankie to see, the streets that we talk about, they're still getting used to the island. So to see some of the streets and actually drive through the water and some of the areas that we're having issues with outfalls getting out there, especially during king tides and full moons like this, when there's no place for the water to go. The water's already over the seawall. So when you get that heavy rain on top of that water comes back up through those duckbills and they flood the streets. So they took good notes on where those things are, and they'll start addressing them right away as best we can.
I think too, with, getting the information out and as compared to last year, having gone through Ian, I think it was a whole different mindset. Like, yep, we're going to go, we're going to heed the warnings, and people, I would hope from here on out too, just like, it is a pain and you got to do it, but that's what you got to do. You got to treat every storm, carefully, because you just don't know. And you've still got some flooding down there, even with this, which isn't, comparably very small compared to what you had 11 months ago.
Yeah. When we first got that first little bit of, what is about 12:30, when we first got that first band that came through and got a lot of, and we were just at high tide was about 11:15 today. So we were just after high tide and it was starting to go down, but you could see that water coming in. I mean, it quickly receded, went back down because the tide was going down. But yeah, you worry about it all the time.
Now, Dan, one of the reminder that one of the reminders that I thought of when I saw all this water today, I mean, it wasn't a major storm. We now know that everything can hit at the same time, not just once. It could hit at the same time every time the storm comes through. It kind of reminded me about how important it is to be building higher when you build back.
Yeah, you see a lot of the places that are on some of the streets that either haven't gotten the tiers that we haven't gotten to yet before Ian for the storm water or the storm sewers, and those streets like Bahia Villa is one. There's several of them that are out there that are still low lying, that have grade level units where the water is getting very close to them, and this could have been much worse, being that it was a full moon, high tide. Luckily, it was far enough offshore that we aren't having to deal with major flooding. We still have that second band between now and 11. We're obviously keeping a close eye on it. As the storm goes past, we're going to have that dirty end of the storm where you get that circular that comes around, and that's where it brings in the waves and the water. But again, we're still going. Tide's still going out. High tide, I don't think, is till 2 a.m., 2:20, something like that in the morning. So it's looking like we're fitting right in that perfect window.
So let's talk about the tides for a second. So you're right. Today it was 11:30. The next high tide is 2:20 in the morning, and then 12:30 tomorrow. So what should the folks on the beach expect in terms of that high tide and the back end of this storm as it relates to the kind of flooding we saw today just from a little bit of rain?
Well, I don't think it'll be as bad. I'm hoping it won't be as bad. Right now, I'm looking out the window, and it's about 2 feet down on our canal below the top of the seawall. We're going to now start to see some of that back end of that storm as it passes us, bring in some of that wave and wind action. But the storm, it looks like it just ticked a little bit west. So we're a little further away from the red, if you will, which is like 30 to 50, somewhere in there. When you get from that red to purple, it gets to 30 to 50 miles an hour winds. And again, tide is changing, or at slack tide or pretty close to it. I think we'll be okay. By the time we get to 2 o'clock in the morning, the storm will have long been past us, and I think we'll be on the lower end. It'll still be windy and rainy, and we'll still have some water, but I don't think we'll be as bad. At least I'm hoping we won't be as bad as we were at 12:30, which wasn't horrible, but you could see some of the panic setting in with some people and the rush to get off the island. All of a sudden, I mean, traffic was packed up way past Publix, so people were scrambling to get off the island when that first wave came through, and you saw the heavy rain and the high tide, and I think it, a little PTSD kicked in for a lot of people, and they were scrambling to get off the island. But then it calmed down, and just about 40 minutes ago, the sun was actually trying to peek out. Now we've got that next band coming through where we're going to start to see some more wind and rain, but I think we dodged a bullet in this case.
So
No, I was just going to ask about what do you think the impacts to the sand and the beach are going to be from this event, from this storm event?
Well, I went out just before that first big wave to kind of look, because our UPS guy came in and said the water is already over the berm, and I'm thinking there's no way. So I ran across the street to look, and it wasn't where he was seeing are the places that didn't sign up and don't have the berm. The water was coming up to their seawall and getting into their parking lots because there was nothing keeping that first little initial, but the water was not over the berm at all, and still has not gone over the berm.
all right. So while you're talking about the berm, Greg Skasny, I know you had one too. Greg sent me a video. I don't think there's any sound, which will be good. I think it's a little bit hard to see, but maybe you can explain how this is working, because it looks like this is coming right up to the berm and it's doing its job.
Yeah, the berm is doing, I think, what it's supposed to do. I can't tell if there's a berm there on that or not. It's too small on my screen, but I took a video earlier. I believe I sent it to you as well, and you can clearly see where there is a berm and where there isn't a berm based on where the water comes up to the buildings. But it's so far it's doing what it's supposed to do. We've been up and down the island probably 10, 15 times today since about noon. So we're trying to keep an eye, and the water is really receding, especially on the side streets that flood. So all fingers crossed.
Denise says PTSD. You weren't kidding. I don't mean to laugh, Denise, but I thought that comment was
no. I think everybody had it when that. I mean, myself included. It was when you first got that. Anybody that was down here and saw it, it was that first big heavy rain and wind, and then the water was coming up through the storm drains because the water. The tide alone had already had it over the top of the seawall. So there was that first initial, we need to get our employees off the island. So they quickly scrambled and got over the bridge. Just before that, I actually had ran off the island for a second, and I could see the water was up close to the San Carlos roadway. And by the time I turned around and came back, not even 10 minutes later, the water was already coming onto the roadway. Yeah. So I got back. I was like, we need to get these people out of here, because you still have it so fresh in your memory that what happened a year ago or almost a year ago, that you never know what to expect. With that, I hadn't seen a TV in probably an hour and a half or 2 hours when that happened. So I let this thing take a turn to the right, and we're getting right back to where we were. So I think it was real for everybody for about a half hour to an hour there, and then things have calmed down.
Well, and this is really the first, real weather event since the storm, to see how things are going to play out, even with something on such a smaller scale. Now, if this had been a year ago, that water probably would not have gone where it went, right? So now you're able to see kind of where you're at least in the short term, until infrastructure gets built back up and there's new sand and all of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a combination of things, between the berm, and I know that there's been some chatter out there that, it's been 11 months and we haven't cleaned the storm drains. And I can assure you, I signed the checks. Those storm drains are getting cleaned often and frequently. They are always out there. Earthview was out there again today until they had to get off the island, but they were out there today cleaning. And I just think to myself, what would it be like if we hadn't been continually cleaning? Initially we thought they're going to be able to come through once, clean the storm drains, and everything will be fine. Well, then the first rain, all that sand and stuff, small debris that's on the side streets washes in. You got to clean it out again, and more sand washes in because there's nothing to block it. All the houses on the beach are gone. Mm-hmm. So this is going to be a continually moving target to hit to try to get them clean. So, we stopped specifically today at several different drains in several parts of the island just to see how it's draining. You know, you had to clean off some of the stuff that had washed on top of it that was blocking some of the flow. But for the most part, they were all working the way they were supposed to work, and it's flowing out. But, you know, when the water is all the way up to the top of the seawall, there's not a lot of place for it to go. And if it does dump out, it's just coming right back over the seawall. But so far, things are holding up well, and we're pretty happy with it.
So when you're talking about the sand that continually keeps filling into the storm drains, you know, what is the fix for that with the, as far as beach renourishment and more berms or a longer berm or whatever?
Well, silt fences are your best course of defense, something like that. Some of these empty lots that don't have silt fences, if they can put up silt fences to stop the snow or the sand from blowing into the street. I was just talking to just doing another interview, and someone from the Midwest was talking about snowstorms, so it made me think of that. But, you know, anything you can put up to keep the silt fences or whatever to stop that sand from blowing onto Estero Boulevard or down the side streets certainly would help.
Okay. So this isn't going to be perfect, but I'm going to pull
here we go.
These are some of the pictures from earlier. And, you know, seeing those pictures after, you know, what happened 11 months ago, for sure, freak people out. Like when you see, Dan, how come all that water sits like that on Crescent Street?
Well, we're certainly going to find out. I mean, I've been down there and I've seen it, and it has to do with the duct. I'm not a sewer engineer, so I can't speak to it, but there's these things, I think they're called duct bills, that they're supposed to open and then close to not let the king tides come back in. And I don't think all of those are working properly, because it shouldn't be that bad. We did go down this street as well as 3rd Street a few times just to see how the drains were working. And you could clearly see the water was dumping heavily into the drain. So water is going in. I think just when we had the king tide, it was back flowing. That's just the king tide coming over the seawall. Looks like that's probably Moss Marine.
Yep, that's Moss Marine right there.
But that has nothing to do with storm drain. That's simply the king tide and the storm pushing it over the seawall.
There we have
the dock box, it looks like.
Somebody forgot to. I remember you guys at the council meeting saying, make sure you're batting down the hatches, but somebody that was rescued, by the way. There's a guy standing on the canal right there that you don't see that wheels it in and returns it to its rightful owners. So this was from Island's End, you know, just some shots of the beach there.
Yeah. So you can see that the water, how far it came up on the south end of the island.
Yeah.
And they don't have they don't have a berm down there to stop any of that.
Now, was that an area that's going to get beach renourishment during the big project or not?
I believe that section is. I believe that they signed the waivers, and they don't have the berm yet because the bird nesting season. So that's
right.
That section of the beach is the 20% that hasn't been finished yet.
Gotcha.
I was Crescent.
Yeah, I was down at the Wyndham last weekend, and I noticed the bird fencing was gone. There was a couple of birds still in the pond there, but the fencing was all gone. So I'm guessing whatever season must have expired or something. Did bird season expire or something? I'm not. It
looks like they just moved around. That water definitely. Any nests that were there, my guess is they were probably floating, but they were all over. Bay Oaks. They were everywhere today. The birds were all over. That picture right there, that looks like Crescent Street. We drove through that right after like the 12:30, right around that area time frame, and we came back about an hour later, and the water was all the way down, probably 3/4 of the way of the street. So it had receded that far, that fast, but there's still a lot of water sitting there.
And that's all water from the Back Bay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's just sitting water. It's no place to go out. So that canal that runs back there, that canal was pretty high when we went by there. And just about an hour ago when I went by, it was down over the seawall about a foot and a half is what it looked like from the road.
You know, if anybody got water into their, living space?
I haven't heard anything yet, but I don't know what street that is, but
Ibis.
Ibis. Okay.
So I'm just sharing pictures with you that the folks have sent in all day long. Let's see. This one is Fishtail Canal from Linnell. Just see the.
That's kind of what it looks like up in the canal, our canal right now, similar
Okay.
to that.
All right.
Well, somebody sent us some information from Leonardo Arms, but we didn't get to put that up, and saying that their seawall was holding.
So this is Doc Ford's. I mean, at first I saw that, I'm like, holy shit, they just opened up, but it looks like they were well prepared. I mean, all the stuff is gone. I'm sure they're not happy with this because that's all new wood there, but their stuff isn't floating away this time.
Yeah, I mean, even without the hurricane going by, the second full moon of the month, and high tide, it's just a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, and this is from John behind Ocean Harbor.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, that's where he's staying. So, I mean, all those pictures, this is Matanzas. So this is down the street. It's not too bad right there, but still, I mean, it's still water going into their
Yeah, it looks like the docks weren't quite under, but I think at one point there was water higher than that there.
Video.
Oh boy.
Where is this? This is Virginia Avenue.
Does that say what time was that video taken?
Or 4 hours ago. Yeah, way long ago. Yeah. This under the bridge there got nice.
That was probably right around that 12:30 initial.
I just want to show you
wave that we came through.
Here's the video. Here's the video that got the most. Of course, it got the most views, and everybody was borrowing it, and the most comments because obviously that's more water than anything that we've seen so far.
Yeah, and there was a lot of water there for a little while. It's since gone down, and that was without the major storm surge pushing.
Or the rain. I mean, that's the thing. It's like,
It wasn't a ton.
It rained pretty hard, but
did it?
It's been weird. It's been raining really hard, and then it would stop. It'll stop for about 20 minutes, then it'll rain really hard again, and the wind will kick up. But right now, it's pretty calm out there for the most part.
So, one of the questions that came up about the town was, why was the town out taking pictures? And I know you guys explained that, Andy explained it at the meeting. So why don't you let people know why the town's taking pictures?
So we wanted to put it out there so that people understood what we were doing. It was just in case this storm turned and came towards us. If anything we learned is to document and picture everything for FEMA purposes, because if you don't have it, you don't have anything to show them. This is what it looked like before the storm. So just out of caution, and from what we learned after Ian, that's why we were out there. But we wanted to make sure people knew we were doing it before we were out there just taking pictures. We didn't want them thinking it was code enforcement doing anything. It was literally just to be prepared in case something did turn and make it much worse than what we got.
Right. And the last time they were taking pictures and not telling anybody, and it wasn't the town, it was the other agency.
Right. This was us taking pictures.
Do you think now that you've kind of gone through this practice exercise, luckily, that, oh, geez, I forgot this, or we forgot that, or this is what we need to do? Have you got to that point yet, or you're going to reevaluate that later on?
No, I think it's gone fairly smooth. I think what we did learn today at about 12:30 is maybe we push things a little bit too far, or not let people get off the island. Talking about employees. I think that was one thing that I noticed today. We should have maybe let them go a little bit earlier because there was that mad rush and everybody wants the rain and the surge came, not the surge, but the tide was high and it all just kind of came at once. You could see the people starting to rush and try to get off the island. So I think we should have probably did that maybe a little bit earlier, just side on the, on caution side. But otherwise, everything's been good. We've had good communication with the sheriff's department. We've had good communication with the fire district. Like I said, we've been seeing each other up and down the island for the last few hours. So there's a lot of presence out there, but it was a good practice run, I guess, if that's the best way to say it. But I think that's the biggest thing we took out of today.
Do you think
Andy, I know, was having a lot of meeting with staff today about here's what we're going to do tomorrow, here's what we're going to do today. Yeah. So they've been working in that.
Do you think that if there's something like this in the future, tropical storm or whatever, you will be more forceful in telling people it's everybody get off the island. We're going to flood. No matter what, we're going to flood.
Well, we can't force someone to leave their house, but
sure.
we can be more forceful with our messaging. I think the point is to try to get your point across, emphasize that at the end of the day, the decision really is you. If you want to leave, you should leave. And we can give you all the facts that we know. We can give you all the information that we know, but at the end of the day, it's your decision. We can't force you to leave. We can strongly encourage you to leave, but we can't drag you out of your house. But I think today, people, over the last 2 days, people have really listened. They paid attention, and hopefully it's because we're trying to get more information out faster, as fast as we can, and communicate it at a point where people get tired of seeing us. Because then it means that we're doing our job and the information is getting out there. I'd hate for one or two people to not. We did have someone today that was standing outside our trailer, believe it or not, at about 1:15, 1:30, saying, I didn't know that you were going to be closing today. I didn't know that I had to come in and get my pass in person. So there are people that don't, and she was standing there holding a baby. So, all of our staff was gone. We just happened to keep stopping back in to see if anybody was there. And she was standing on the step holding a baby, wanting to get her hurricane reentry pass. And, as long as we see that, we can do a better job. We got to work harder to make sure that I don't care if we got to drive up and down streets next time, whatever it is, we need to, with bullhorns, whatever we need to do, we can always improve. So, but I think we did much better now than we've done in the past. And I think we were much more prepared. Fortunately, we're not having to deal with what we had to deal with 11 months ago, but it was a good practice run.
I mean, and I think this is rhetorical, but is there anything that can be done when you talked about that the backup of traffic, like to just remind people? I mean, granted, this didn't end up being a life-threatening situation, at least there on the beach. How do you get people to mobilize quicker?
You know what? You try to get the message out sooner, I guess. People have been paying attention. They've known this storm's been coming for a couple days. It did come up. And I think what led to the traffic today wasn't necessarily the amount of people that were flooding off the island to get out of here, as it was their inability to get off as quickly as they wanted to. San Carlos, just past San Carlos Island over the second bridge, that water was coming up over the marina long before that first 12:30 hit. Like I said, I drove by and I could see it already coming into the parking lot. And less than 15 minutes later, I'm coming back and you're driving through a foot of water. So once I got on the island, then you could start to see the traffic backing up. Nobody was going south. Everybody was trying to go north off the island. So things outside of our control, the water coming onto San Carlos Boulevard, people were driving through it and the water. So I think that slowed a lot of people down.
Yeah.
And then we did see the sheriff's department and we did see the fire trucks take off that way. So I'm wondering if maybe I don't know what happened, but I'm guessing maybe a car went through it too fast and stalled out because the traffic backed up. But within 15, 20 minutes, once we went past Publix, went to the south end of the island and came back, it was already all the way up to Red Coconut. So
Charles,
it moved pretty quick.
Nobody has approved a bigger building yet, Charles. Give them a chance to at least see the application, please. We're not talking about the big buildings today. Relax, bro. So the thing is almost like if the storm's not the thing, it's odd because you think the storm's not coming. You have a pretty good idea that monster's not coming. And if you live in a house, it might have just been wiser to stay in the house and go upstairs because it was just the flooding. But who knows? I mean, who knows what the right answer is when you're dealing with what you dealt with 11 months ago?
Well, and I think it's important to get out what you just said about when the water's coming up at the marina and it's in another air, like it's not just getting off the island, it's that section to really get off, easily. So if the water, that's might have been new to people for that flooding to occur there and then have that problem. That's the thing. It's all new now because the landscape has changed for one thing. So you don't know how it's going to go until this first storm kind of comes through.
Yeah, I mean, it's the unpredictability. Anybody that watched Mitch's video and saw that water coming up and to hear him, it just rings in my head every time I see this kind of stuff going on like today. You hear him say, I think we made a mistake. And it's a mistake that we can all avoid. And if in this case, you only have to be gone for 24 or 48 hours. There's plenty of places for you to go. Why not? this storm could have taken a hard right and come at us again, like Charlie did, like Irma went up the middle of the state, and like Ian did. So you never know. This thing, and like I said before, we can control a lot of things, but we can't control Mother Nature. She's going to do what she's going to do, and once it gets into the Gulf of Mexico, I mean, this one has stayed pretty true to the path, but that's obviously not always the case. So it's if you've got the means, and especially if you're living in a trailer, like I said, you just go find someplace else for the night and let it pass. And the worst thing you're out is maybe a trailer.
All right.
Yeah, and
Charles,
I
no
think-
worries, brother. We're
I
friends.
know.
Again.
I think too, that now that when the Gulf is so warm, that anything that gets in there is going to intensify quickly. So, you don't seem to hear ones and twos. It's like 3, 4, 5, they really pick up a lot of intensity as they go through there.
Yeah, and I think that's what they were talking about with this one. I haven't seen where it's at now over the last hour, but they were talking about potentially being a 3 when it makes landfall tomorrow, and where it's going into the Big Bend area, all the places on that the southeast side of that storm, they're going to deal with what we dealt with 11 months ago, and I don't know what the tides are up there. For their sake, I certainly hope it's low tide when that surge comes in. That would be ideal, but at this point, it's going to do what it's going to do now, and you just hopefully people up there in the Big Bend are listening and paying attention and remembering, what our area went through last year, and they're getting out of town.
So a casualty to this whole monster event was the ceremony that you guys had planned for the baseball field. And obviously it was the right call to cancel it because you never know what was going to happen. But I turned around today because Jeff was sitting behind me, and I was just like, you felt like saying sorry to him because he worked so hard. And everybody on the staff worked so hard to be ready for a certain date, and they were ready. They met the deadline. The field looked great. Everybody was out there rolling sod, and you had to cancel that. But I mean,
that was very hard because to see the amount of people, just the staff, the fire department, the volunteers from the island that came out to help make that a reality. Little League Baseball or Major League Baseball that came out. It was just. It broke my heart to have to do it, but I think it was the right decision. It was, people were trying to get their lives in order to try to get off the island. So we looked at it as you can't make you can't ask people to do two things. You can't ask them to leave the island to be safe and then try to bring them back for a celebration that we can do on another day, hopefully. So I felt horrible for Jeff and his crew. They were out there busting their butt day in and day out. And they met the deadline, but he understood. I was able to talk to him today, and he's such a good guy. He's a hardworking guy. He and his whole staff, and I felt horrible. But the good news is, if Bruiser's watching, they have about 450 hot dogs over there that are ready to be eaten. So Bruiser and Trey are big hot dog eaters, so that'll perk their ears up a little bit.
Wow, it sounds like a hot dog eating contest.
Yeah. They both love their hot dogs.
Wow. So one of the other town facilities that's coming in across the finish line is Bayside Park. I went over there today before the meeting, and they were nicing up the area where you're going to put the AstroTurf back down, and they were working out there right up until the rain started. So it's coming along great, man.
Yeah, we're getting close. They got I think probably half of the sod in today.
Cool.
And then they obviously had to stop, so they've got the other half and some finishing stuff to do. I don't know if they'll be back tomorrow. Obviously, we were worried about is it going to float away on us? Getting so close, but we'll be as close as we can be by September 1st. There'll still be a few things. Obviously, the lights, we can't get the lights in time, so there'll be a couple lights that there is one light that did turn on out there. So there is at least one light out there that illuminates the stage that seems to work just fine. The uplighting stuff, that stuff was all wrecked, but all the plantings in, most of the pavers are in. Some of the pavers disappeared, so we're short a couple, and they don't make those clay pavers anymore. So before anybody starts sending me emails saying, why are there different colored pavers? They're not different colored, but they're just, you can't get clay pavers anymore. So the color is going to be a little bit off. They won't be exactly the same. So save the emails. Don't say we know that. As soon as we can get the right stuff in there, we'll get it in there. But Frankie and the staff have really been working hard to make sure that this gets done. And the poles look great. They were repainted. The stage was repainted. So it's looking good. The temporary fencing is up there. It's painted not my favorite colors, the brown and green, but it is what it is at this point. We're just trying to get it so that it's safe enough and people can start enjoying it.
Yep. And another project that the town is undertaking is checking out or boring down the concrete in Times Square to see what's under there. So this freaking clock can go back in there. And I don't know, maybe are we making a big deal of the clock? I mean, is it really worth all this to have that clock in that area?
Oh,
I love the
Well,
clock.
I'll tell you, Ed, people love that clock. The fact that that it was donated from a family on the island was spectacular. And what we're doing out there, we would have to do anyway to do the redevelopment project. It's not like we're not doing anything. We don't know what's down there. There's some things that haven't been seen. People forget that used to be the main thoroughfare onto the island before the bridge was built. So, yeah, see, be nice to the clock. People love that clock.
Andy, I'm not criticizing the clock. I love the clock. We have pictures near the clock, but you're taking a nice new clock and you're basically putting in a dangerous area. The place is, I mean, no offense to Yo Taco and Tom, they're all trying to do great things, but I mean, let's face it, it's still kind of dumpy. I mean, why not put the clock in Bayside Park? You have electricity there. You don't even need to bore down.
Because they want to keep it where it was originally.
Well, you could always move it, right? I mean, it just seems like,
I don't know. Could you move it? That seems like a lot.
I think, quite honestly, I think it's important. Everybody understands how things are going to change and houses are going to look different and structures are going to look different. It's nice to bring back a little bit of normalcy or a little bit of what we had.
just have one thing from before.
Yeah, I mean, you look at what the Poinsettia tree did in December. Everybody loved that. They flocked out to take pictures of it because they have so many memories. It's not just the residents and the people of Lee County that come and visit. There's people from all over the world that come to visit Fort Myers Beach, and to be able to give them something. Everybody has something different about the island that they love the most, and that's one aspect. So I'm excited that it'll be back. I'm excited. Hopefully we can get it up and running by the 28th. That's our goal. But if it can bring back a little bit of normalcy for somebody amongst all the things that are changing, I think that's a good thing to do.
How was Times Square during when it was raining and the water was coming up? Did it flood down there?
It was coming up pretty good. I was actually on the south end of the island, and by the time I got back up there, it kind of died down a little bit because the traffic was backed up so far. But there's no berm there, so the water came up much higher than it did anywhere else. If you got that video I sent you, I think it really can show you the difference between what the berm did and what the berm doesn't do if you don't have it.
Did you text it to me or email it? If you text it, I'll get it.
I think I texted to you.
Yeah, I'll be able to get it up before we finish up.
Well, I mean, before all this storm, stuff started, what are some other things you might want to bring up that are going on?
As far as today, or that
No. As far as in the works. Yeah.
They'll be starting this week. The storm has obviously pushed them back a couple of days. The renovation of the gymnasium. They've got their trailers set up. They've got the stuff out there, so they're going to be pushing for that. We're still shooting for the November 1st deadline to get that open. That's what we were working with the school board to try to make happen. I don't know that the school board will make their deadline that they were hopefully shooting for. We're certainly going to try to hope to get that done. If it runs a little bit over because of things outside of our control, then that's what happens. But so they're starting on that. Obviously, the town hall is now completely gone, and that's graded. We're still in discussions with the fire district about swapping those two properties. We're much closer to that. I believe our attorney has drafted an agreement that we'll send over to them, and they can take a look at, and we'll go from there. Times Square, obviously, we're still working on it. There's every project we've talked about the entire way. They're all still moving in the background. It's just a matter of, for us, we were trying to look at what projects can we get going. We're working on the pool. That's a big thing. We're working with a company now. We're going to have a company come in and take a look at that to maybe do some different things there to make it more fun and more user friendly. All these things that we're trying to get done, with FEMA, as I've said before, you have to complete a project before you get the funding reimbursed to you from them. So you have to unfortunately spend some money to get the money back. So we're trying to work on some of the projects that aren't. And thank you very much to the governor and the first lady for sending the money that they did send for Bayside Park. That certainly helped us a lot to be able to put what little money we have to spend on these projects into other areas. So that was a great help to us. And we'll be able to start putting these through then to FEMA and start getting some of these obligated projects paid out.
In terms of town hall, I've lost track on what the plan is for the building. Is it just way too early for that? Or I know there was some discussion I thought a while back, but.
Yeah, I think Andy talked about it when he did the walk around with Ed. We're looking at all kinds of things. One of the options is looking at adding on to the building that's already designed for Bay Oaks, adding a story or two to it and putting town hall there and having one complex. Obviously, we're looking at firms. They're trying to procure a couple firms right now that can make it. And the reason we're doing that is, one, it's going to save the town money. Two, we could provide a structure that could be very hardened, that could act as an EOC. It can act for a safe shelter for people to not have to go. Thank God we have Estero and North Fort Myers that are open now, but try to provide a place for people that maybe don't have transportation or don't have the ability to get somewhere to be able to go in case of an emergency that is high. They'll stay dry and they can stay safe. So what we're really looking at making a very hardened structure. So the staff is working with, I think, 3 or 4 companies right now to try to procure one to be able to start the design process so that we can get that moving. And another thought by using that building is that'll speed it up by a year because it's already a design building. There maybe have to be some tweaks to it to make it work. But by doing that and saving some money, we would also hopefully be able to add that phase 2 that we were talking about to the building when it gets built, if that gets decided to be done. So that then we could maybe use the old building for our public works, storage for all of our equipment that we pay a lot of money for. So it's not sitting outside in the elements and we're not having to worry about it. But so that's just one idea. Building on the current town hall site is another. Obviously, if we swap properties, building on the old fire station is another. So there's 3 options out there that we have. It's just what's going to make the most sense, what's going to save the town money, and what can we get done the fastest.
Yeah, and you mentioned Times Square. What phase of anything are we in Times Square 11 months later? Is there any committee or any discussions about anything that could possibly be done?
Yes and no. There's been discussions, but there's been no formal sit down. There's been no town, county, and every business owner sitting down and having a conversation as to what it could look like. The county's obviously looking at us to what do we think it should look like. We have ideas, obviously. It's just getting everybody on the same page. There are some property owners that want to do something completely different than other property owners. So do you just do what you do and control what you can control? In our case, Times Square, and the county controls the park and the pier, and then the businesses do what they do? Or do you really sit down at a table and work through it and say, this is what makes sense for everybody to make a very nice, cohesive Times Square area? It's very important that everybody's on the same page, because if not everyone agrees, there's a lot of personalities and a lot of people involved. If you have one that doesn't agree with it, that is in the middle of Times Square somewhere, then the whole plan doesn't work, because you need everybody to buy in to a plan. And until that happens, we're going to be spinning our wheels.
Okay, so what are the chances that the town and the county get together and buy all that property and make it a park?
Well, you can't certainly buy a property from unwilling sellers. I mean, I guess there's a way that I guess there's a way you could go about it, but you have to have my understanding is you have to have a project and an idea for a project. That's definitely an option. It's just a matter of coming to an agreement. So that conversation has been had too, I guess. I mean, I haven't sat in all those conversations, but I know it's been had.
Okay.
Well, ideally, though, I mean, I know you said, do we all come together? Or do we all proceed on our own? It doesn't seem feasible to everybody to proceed kind of in their own in their own way because there is such a cohesiveness of properties and areas down there.
Well, yeah, and if we've learned anything over the last few months, it's not everybody likes what everybody else likes. So, the county's been very good about asking us, well, what do you want to see down there? Let's use a pier, for instance. Do you want the pier to look exactly like it did before, or do you want to make it better? Those are questions that I think our residents need to weigh in on. Would you rather, maybe this is a poll question for you, Ed, there you go. Would you rather see the pier go back exactly the way it was, or would you rather see it enhanced with an enhanced area, park area between Lynn Hall Park, Times Square, and Crescent, because there's a lot of cool things that you can do in there. You could elevate the entire thing and have just 2 elevators and 2 sets of stairs, whereas every business would have to have an elevator and stairs if it's all individual, for ADA compliance issues. So it's just a matter of what do people think? If anybody's been to the Caribbean and seen some things, there's a lot of cool ideas you can do out there in elevating that entire space, but still having the lower level open you can still have cocktails down there, still make it walkable. Still make it walkable, still make things happen there, still make it fun that then could connect to the pier. But it takes time and it takes money. And I think that's where a lot of people forget that just to design the Times Square area like we're talking about is going to cost quite a bit of money.
Were you saying to raise the pier up, or you mean in the Times Square area?
So everything in the Times Square area is going to have to be built
right
the current height. So you're not going to have what we had before there. Or I've heard other people say, why don't we just make it a nice park with food trucks and do that kind of vibe, which is cool too. It's just a matter of what makes the most sense. What do we want that area to look like? And having the county's parks on either side, they're willing to work with us to do what we want to do there. I don't think anybody really wants to see 3, 4, 5-story buildings right there in front of the pier. I could be wrong, but I don't think that is what people want to see there. But they want, if everybody had their wishes, I think they'd want to put it back exactly the way it was, because it was fun and funky and you could walk it, it was walkable. But that's not the reality unless you go the food truck route and have things that are mobile. So I think those are conversations we have to have, because if we start designing stuff there, it's gonna cost quite a bit of money. We were working with ULI initially, having conversations with them, and we got quotes back just to have the first initial conversations between $80,000 and $135,000. A lot of money to just have a conversation.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's not going to be cheap, but there are other people out there. I know that the staff has been talking to other people that are willing to come in and help design for free or at a much discounted cost. So really, quite honestly, we're looking at every single option to try to figure out what's
just for a conversation.
Crazy. Those people,
for the most part, it's basically it was basic, and I don't know if that's a going rate or if that's I don't know, but to me it seemed like an awful lot of money to start the conversation about
to
what
facilitate a conversation.
Wow. Okay, so clearly Times Square, at least some kind of construction in Times Square, is years apart. I mean, we're not even really at the discussion stages. Don't you think it's time for those businesses to pull up that nasty concrete and clear it out, make it more beach for now? I mean, it's really time for that all to be cleared out, don't you think? I mean, that one spot where the Dairy Queen was, and on the other, wherever that restaurant was, it's still dangerous, that one piece of cement. I mean, are they going to be on your letter list?
It certainly is time to make your place safe and clean your place up. Those that could do it and have done it, they deserve the same rights that people who have done nothing. So absolutely. As we've said 100 times on here, that letter has been finalized. It's going out. We were working on the dates. Like what is a good date to say you've got till this date? And then we're going to come back and you got till this date. So you got between this date and this date to get this done. If not, we're going to start taking the next step on you. So it's a tedious process. I will be the first to admit it. It's not as fast as I would like to see it go, but it's legally what we have to do.
Okay. All right. So I think I finally might have the video.
You were clickety clacking like a lot.
I don't know why it's like a major project.
I don't either, but I can do it.
Get that up there. All right.
It's not a math quiz.
Oh, Dan, for that strike one.
I'm going to let that one go. All right. So
I'll let that one go.
If I had the bell, Dan, I'd be bringing it for you.
So here's the video that you sent.
So this is directly across the street from town hall, and you can see that where town hall was. I'm standing in an area where there's no berm, and you can see the water coming up. This is before that big push. This was at about 11:30. You can see the water is already going up to the properties. And then as I go back the other way, you'll get a chance to see the berm. So the water is almost up to my feet where I'm standing. And when you see here on the right, you'll see where the berm is at. And the water is not anywhere close to the berm. Or over
Oh,
the
Oh,
berm.
I
okay.
see.
Okay.
It's out there. Okay,
Oh,
I see
there.
where it is
Yeah.
out there.
Yeah, it's hard to see. You got to I tried to zoom in on it here so you could
Yeah.
see a little bit, but you can see how the water is going right past where the berm. And this was, again, before those videos you saw on Crescent Street of all of the water going down. So this was about 11 o'clock. This was after the UPS guy told us the water was coming over the berm. So I had to go see it for myself.
You know, somebody with a drone, that would make a really good drone illustration of.
If you
what
could
we
fly it in
talked
that
about.
wind.
Well,
Yeah,
that's
that'll-
true. That's true. But I mean, we've
I'm
talked
really
about
curious to
that.
see, and I know Chad was out today too. He was taking pictures on the berm and seeing how it works. So Chad was out there working hard today too.
So the what happened today and all those pictures that we were able to share and all what you've been able to see, you think that's going to encourage more people to sign the easement for the big project, or they're either they're in or they're out right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's still some time. I can tell you, if I had to make a decision, I saw those videos, it would
Yeah.
certainly change my mind. And that was before the water really got high. The water, I think, at the highest we saw it on the berm was probably about halfway up the berm, and the water was really coming in between. You know, it creates a funnel. The water just funnels right to those spots, and it's going to go somewhere. And
Yeah.
it just, you know, you're leaving yourself exposed. But I completely understand their willingness or lack of wanting to sign it. It's everybody's personal preference, but those videos would certainly change my mind.
Yeah, I was thinking about that it does create a funnel. So now it's like, now you're even going to get more because it's all going to get pushed into a smaller area instead of spreading out.
Well, you look at the area of Hibiscus. When you go down there, that property on the right is still scoured out. And then you look at what happened to those concrete homes along that street. I think the 8-10 houses on that street were completely leveled down to the slab. The brick, everything, mortar gone. And that's an example of what could happen if you don't have that berm to stop that surge.
Yeah, and then not only that though, if I remember hearing either Chad or Mike Poff saying, once the water gets in that area, you're ruining it for your neighbors too, because it has to wash back out somehow, and you know it's either going to cave in or it's going to defeat the purpose. I'm not trying to convince somebody to sign an easement that they don't want to sign, but I mean that the physics of the whole thing screws it up for your neighbor too.
Yeah, you know, with the amount of storm, we've all talked about it ad nauseum about the amount of sand that was lost, and that berm was there to do exactly what it did today. It was without that berm, we'd have had water on Estero Boulevard.
Oh yeah,
no doubt. And this wasn't a storm that was even close yet. So it's there. It's not going to stop an Ian by any stretch of the imagination, but it's there to do what it did today for the storm that we had.
Right.
Until we can get the renourishment done and we can get back what we had before the storm.
If, you know, we've heard a lot when people say they don't want to sign the easement, they don't want somebody on their property and all those things. So could they themselves though bring sand in and make their own berm and then connect it to y'all's berm?
I guess, I mean, I don't want to say yes for sure, but I mean, I know that we've talked about, or I should say Chad and Mike have talked that, yeah, you can buy your own sand and you can bring your own sand in and fill it in if that's what you want to do, if you don't want to be part of it. And then he gave the cost of what it's not cheap to do, but you certainly could.
Well, yeah, you don't have anyone. I mean, then those other worries are off the table. I mean,
I wonder if there's any way to kind of force them to do that, but I guess not. It's their property. But so it's almost time to wrap up, Dan. If we do get back to normal business Thursday night, everyone's going to get their first look at Oh shit, I'm already drawing a blank here. Myerside. And then Friday night we're talking to Ben again about Moss Marina. So, those projects will be back on the top of the agenda eventually when one comes in front of the LPA. So, will you be at the meeting on Thursday night? And what do you think the people will say about it?
About Myerside?
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that a lot of the same questions will be asked that were asked of the other. How does that fit into the codes that we currently have in place? I think that'll be the questions that are going to be asked. I think people will be pleasantly surprised. I think you might have already shared the pictures, so they've seen the pictures already.
Yeah.
But and I don't know if it's changed since then. They maybe have tweaked some things. I haven't had a chance to talk to Patrick to see if things have changed or not. But I'm excited to see it. I mean, I'm excited to see anything, and hopefully it can fit. Hopefully it works as long as it meets what it needs to meet, and we'll go from there. We'll find out Thursday potentially.
We love those guys. We love Patrick. We saw the pictures, and every picture, when you see a picture like that, it always makes it look like the new 7-Eleven. It looks freaking outstanding. Then you go to the spot and you say, "Oh wow, that thing's going to fit right here." I mean, because you can see the piece of property, and you wonder, that house is a lot closer than it looked in that picture. And, if it all works out, it all works out. But it's a little different when you're standing on that piece of property and you see what you see.
I think I remember back in Minnesota in the late 80s, early 90s, when they were building the Mall of America, and standing there and thinking, how are they going to fit this massive monstrosity on this little piece of property? And, there it is. And, they do this for a living. These people that design these buildings, that they know what they're doing. They know what they can build. And that's the business they're in. It just, it's hard to sometimes see a big open square empty lot and envision what could be on there until you actually start putting numbers to it and putting drawings to it.
Yeah.
Somebody was asking, where is Myerside? So it's by the library on School Street. Next to the library. Yeah. I think the thing with the pictures, it's a little bit of a double-edged sword, because when you know the size of the lot and then you look at the drawing, you're like, oh my goodness, there's no way. But the drawing looks good. You need to see. It also gives people like, oh, that I like the design of that, or I like the style of that, or, whatever. But it is hard to, when you see that just in Moss Marina, it's hard to envision something at that scale.
And the other thing too is if that building gets put there, it's not any higher than the library, and the library is pretty high. I mean, that is a big building that, is sitting right next to it. That doesn't mean anything. I know it's zoning. It's all about the zoning and what fits in the box and all that. But
it's difficult to tell from a picture, really how high things are. When you start adding architectural type features, cupolas, whatever you're going to put on top of it, it's hard to really put a height to that. And even when you hear a height, you think, if someone says, I'm going to build something 150 feet tall, you don't think, well, I got to start at 20 feet if, you're at a certain area. Yeah. So that's 20 feet that shouldn't technically, or doesn't count towards that height. But when you hear numbers, it's until you see and that's why I've said it so many times, until you actually see an actual proposal of size, density, all these other things that we've talked about so many times, it's hard to give an opinion on it. You could say, I like the architecture of Myerside. I've said it before. I think their architecture, I'm an architecture. Look, I like architecture. So it fits kind of the vibe. It fits the look. Now will it meet all the other requirements? That's what we'll have to work through.
Yeah. And Dan, let me ask you this. If somebody, any developer, not anyone specifically, a lot of what's going on is, hey, the construction costs are so much higher, and this is so much higher, and the investment in that plot of land was so much more expensive because of the pricing. If somebody came to you and showed you the books that proved to you that they needed X number of rooms to make a decent profit on it, let me finish.
Decent. Define decent.
He considers decent and not absurd or obscene. A decent, a small profit, but they don't fit into the rules. Does that matter to you?
Of course it matters, because that's not a criteria that's in our current land development code or comp plan, or it's not a requirement for us. The financial viability of a project is not a requirement for us to approve or deny something. we certainly understand it. Anybody that's been working on their house over the last year understands what the costs are doing, and they completely understand that. But the people that are buying these properties, they know what their bottom dollar is. They know what they can afford to do and what they can't afford to do. They certainly they're going to want to ask for more. It's just business. That's, I mean, the way it is. And if there's certain things that can be done that make sense, then you do them. If not, then you don't buy the property. So to me, whether or not it makes a return on their investment at this level or this level is not a reason I'm going to make a decision one way or another.
I just wonder, what is your number? Like, what do you think is a reasonable or acceptable?
I don't want to.
Your mic was cutting out there. Because you look at it, Ed. Although the person A that may be buying a piece of property, their return on their investment has to be this much.
Yeah.
But maybe the next person, theirs is half that. So we can't control who's buying what. We can only control what we know is in front of us and what we see and make the decisions then.
So again, I know we're getting into the weeds and we weren't planning on it, but this is all very interesting to me.
That's never going to happen with you. We're always going to get in the weeds.
I know.
with something.
But I love,
The seaweed.
the conversation about the development, especially in that downtown area, is fascinating to me because it's such a small area. There's not going to be any more lanes for traffic. Yet there's almost we have to have this or else kind of thing going on, and nothing's come before the LPA or the council yet. And there's an election year coming up, and I think that will play a role on the election, depending on which way a vote might go. I don't know if there's enough time for that, but in that area of Times Square and all the way down to Myerside, the Neptune and Margaritaville, if they were all approved, the infrastructure would basically fall into the water. I mean, I'm exaggerating.
I've been trying to say that. I've been trying to say that for months. It's the thing that nobody likes to talk about. Yep, there you go. Kim remembers. The tube is only so big, and it can only take so much. And if it's not a pretty thing that people like to talk about, but it's very, very important. If you just look at today, I mean, the infrastructure can only hold so much. Your storm sewers can only hold so much. It's no different when it comes to electricity, when it comes to the internet, when it comes to sewage, when it comes to all these other things.
Yeah, or water pressure. I mean, we were somewhere this weekend where we were talking about a building that was going up, and that was one of the issues, is there wasn't going to be enough water pressure to reach, the top floors. And who's going to pay beaucoup bucks to be on the top floor and not have water to take a shower, pressure, or flush toilets?
And even on a smaller scale, if you read the 7-Eleven application, they're asking for a bigger building. And they're going to a CPD, and if they're supposed to have 50% green space, but they say they can't make it work unless it's only 21% green space. And what they also have on there is a driveway from Estero Boulevard. And the first thing I thought was, well, kill that right there. I mean, that's one of the biggest problems, is all those driveways on Estero Boulevard all the way up and down, to Seagrape. And so that'll be interesting too, to see, if they get as much attention on a smaller scale because of the changes that they're asking for compared to a bigger development.
Well, I haven't had a chance to take a look at that one yet, so I'm not 100% sure what exactly you're talking about, to be honest, because I haven't had a chance to look at it.
You've been a little busy.
Yeah, but staff has to look at these things. They have to make their recommendations, and I'm sure that they go back and forth with staff several times about it before they submit what they're going to submit. For me to weigh in on it one way or another, without seeing it, I really can't.
Gotcha. All right. We see you've got some dinner guests there behind you, so we're going to let you go for tonight.
We invited Andy and Frankie over for dinner since they're
Nice.
staying on the island with me, and
His
they're getting fully
Andy,
eyes right
big head's
now.
in the back of the picture. We can see it back there.
See him laughing back there.
Did we miss anything that you wanted to make sure we got across?
No, I think
All right.
keep an eye out over the next couple hours as that next band comes through, and everybody stay safe.
All right, man. Thanks a lot, Dan. Appreciate it. See you soon.
Thanks.
All right, Mayor Dan Allers, everybody, and It's always great to talk to him and get an update on everything. And keep your pictures coming, folks. The pictures that you've been sharing have been great. Don't go out in the water later to take your pictures.
Yeah, don't
It
do
seemed like
anything
everything.
crazy to do
It seemed
that.
like everything was from a safe distance today. A lot of them were in the sunshine, and it wasn't raining, but it was just flooding everywhere. So thank you all for that. We will be at the Myerside meeting on Thursday, and then the race is Sunday. So if you haven't registered for the race, please go on our website at beachtalkradionews.com. We were about at 180. The goal was 200. So it'd be great if we could get 200 and give a nice check to FMB Strong on Sunday. The race begins at 8 o'clock, and everything after the run on the beach will be inside the Diamond Head Beach Resort Ballroom. So thank you all for that. We have a great show lineup for Saturday.
Everybody sign up.
Wahoo Willies, did you decide if you're going to run or if you're going to volunteer?
Just going to help
I think you're sissying out.
I'm okay. If
We have
people
plenty of volunteers.
want to run together, I'll do it.
I think you have a running partner, don't you?
Well, she's going to be far ahead.
Brenda is out there training and
Be ahead of me. On mile 1, she'll be like crossing the finish line, just regular breathing. I come across, I'm flip-flopping on the ground like a fish out of water. I need oxygen. It's a whole thing.
Now, who were we talking to the other day where you thought they were going to run the race in 22 minutes? Oh, Tom
Yeah,
from La
Tom
Ola
Bolton.
signed up.
22 minutes.
And then you realized he hadn't run in like 10 years.
Yeah.
So
He's tall, long-legged, so
Yeah.
I figured,
he's just going to do it in like 10 strides and be done with it. And we have really cool medals for everybody. The top 3 finishers, not everybody, the top 3 finishers in each age category. I don't know if I told you this, but an 80-year-old
Yes, you
woman
did.
signed up from Lehigh, and she's going to be in the race from. All right, Rhonda. Very nice.
It's not a good look when I'm working out, but I still do it.
I don't think there are any hurricane updates. There was one this afternoon from Lee County, but there really isn't a lot of stuff going on here. If there is, of course, we'll carry it live on our Facebook and YouTube page.
But our thoughts and our concerns and our prayers and all of that stuff are going out to those, to the folks north of us. 'Cause somebody's gonna get it.
Unfortunately.
Yep.
All right, everybody. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Thanks again to Dan for coming on Tuesday night. Yeah. They got some nice new Fort Myers Beach staff shirts that they were all wearing that
Nice.
I think look pretty cool. They should sell those things. People would love that kind of merchandise.
Get people impersonating town staff.
Oh, that's true. Well, it shouldn't say staff on the back of all of them. Thank you all. We will see you next time.